the flash inside the case changes location to aim the beam differently, and I want it to be at 50. And that again will cover most situations. So you can see that I've set my shutter speed here to about 1/125th of a second. And remember, in manual mode, the dial, the jog dial, adjusts the shutter speed. Now, what about the aperture? Well, here again, you make your decision based on what kind of depth of field you want. If you remember, your low f-stop, meaning a large aperture, gives you a shallow depth of field and also allows a lot of light in. So that's always a bit of a compromise. But basically, I set my f-stop anywhere from 3.5 or 5.6, which is the low end of what you can get on the kit lens that comes with the Canon. But if I want a little bit more depth of field, I need a little bit focus. I need better focus and a larger depth of field. I'll put my f-stop at about 8. So again, I'm sure you all know how to do that, but just show you what I've done here. I've set my f-stop to 8. Again, every camera's a little different here. You press the AV button and the jog dial adjusts the f-stop, so I have that set at 8. Okay. I set my ISO at about 400. Most of the modern DSLRs at 400 have excellent performance. You don't get too much noise. You have a reasonable amount of light sensitivity for indoor situations. So that's where I start. May need to adjust that later. Now, what about the flash? Okay, let's get that back on here. Okay, I start off at 1/8. Now you adjust that on this flash with the arrows. Goes up and down 1/8, 1/4, and so forth and so on. I start off in 1/8. Now I can say that for most indoor flash situations of people, in the kind of distances that you'll be using to take pictures of people, between 1/4 and 1/8 power, the flash is going to cover most situations in the technique I'm describing. You don't want to go to full power. It's going to blast people out, and lower power won't give you enough light. And it's important to add here where I'm not talking about direct flash, but rather indirect or bounced flash. You've probably heard about the fact that bounced flash gives you a much better appearance to your flash photography. Direct flash tends to give people red eye. It tends to really give a lot of glare and brightness to the face and very sharp shadows. It tends to make the picture look like it's coming from a point-and-shoot camera. Not great results. As opposed to if you bounce the flash off the ceiling or off a wall, a light-colored surface, it makes the illuminating surface much, much larger, because the light source then becomes that ceiling or wall, and that gives you a much broader area of illumination, gives you softer shadows. It tends to give a much more natural appearance to the lighting of the subjects and around it. So it's a highly recommended technique to use. And you can't do that with the built-in flash. Built-in flash only gives you a beam facing straight ahead, and you can't use it for that. That's why I said earlier you can use the built-in flash or direct flash for fill flash situations, but for the kind of illumination and indoor lighting, indoor lighting or night, you want to really use bounce flash if you can. Now, so you're in manual mode. You've decided on your f-stop. You've decided your ISO. You've decided your shutter speed. What do you want to do with your metering? Okay, so you've made your decisions, basic decisions already. What you want to make sure is that your metering, let's turn this back on, is at least 3 exposure levels below a balanced exposure situation. You can see here when I half press my shutter, it's flashing at -3, which is what I want. And what that means is that with the exposure parameters that I've chosen, I've really cut down on my ambient light exposure level. In other words, if I were to just take this picture without any flash, it would be fairly dark, not necessarily black, but fairly dark. What I've done is I've killed a lot of the ambient light. And the reason I've done that is because I want my flash to really kick in and give me a nice lighting around, and allow me to use my fast shutter speed, which I spoke about previously. Using the flash at 1/4 to 1/8 power, which is what I suggest setting at, adds about 3 stops of exposure. So remember what I said earlier, that if your other parameters are set down at an exposure level or a stop, then your flash can compensate for it. So here, what I'm saying is that you've intentionally set your f-stop and shutter speed and ISO to be underexposed. And your flash is going to compensate that by about 3 f-stops and give you approximately the right exposure. So I've set my exposure. If my EV comes out to say -2 or -1, it means that I have a little bit too much light for my situation. If I leave my flash as it is, things are going to come out too bright. So I either need to let less light in the camera by raising the f-stop, meaning making my exposure level, my shutter smaller, or lowering my ISO. Say if I'm at 400, I'm going to lower it to 200 to bring the EV down. And remember, I can't use the shutter speed because the shutter speed won't affect so much the flash level. Or I can reduce the flash level itself by raising, say, from 1/8 to 1/16. So if it turns out, when I meter the scene, my EV isn't at least 3 stops below where I want it to be, I need to make sure that I get it down there by changing my f-stop or shutter speed or ISO to get that ambient light level down 3 exposure values or less before I take my picture. Next, okay. I take my picture, okay, and I look at the results. Now, if I've estimated things correctly, then my picture will I look at the preview, I look at the histogram. Histogram will give me an idea of, if my exposure levels, if I've blown something out, or if it's going to be too dark. I want to see a nice distribution with no blowout areas. If it's too dark or too light, it means I'm going to need to change my exposure levels a little bit. Now, as I said earlier, the shutter speed isn't going to help me too much if my flash is too bright. So I'm either going to need to turn my flash down. If I start off at 1/8, I'm going to need to turn it down to 1/16. If it's too dark, I need to raise it from 1/8 to 1/4. Or, if I don't want to do that, I can experiment with lowering the f-stop a little bit. In other words, opening up my aperture or raising my ISO. I can go up to 800. So you have a couple ways of going about the situation to make that fine adjustment. Usually you'll find you'll need to just make a one-stop adjustment, one EV level, and I can do that with the flash or with my camera parameters. So I'm going to illustrate this for you, okay, just to show you what I've done, all my settings. Okay, I have, again, the flash set on manual at 1/8 power, 50 zoom. And my camera, I'll try to get this showing here, I have my camera set at, well, you can't read it, but it's on manual mode. Shutter speed's at 1/125th. F-stop of 8.0, and ISO of 400. And I'm going to take a picture in this room of a picture that I have on the wall here. As I look in my metering, the exposure value is it's flashing at -3, so I know I've cut out a lot of my ambient light. Now I'm going to focus and take a picture. Okay, and let's see how the picture came out. Just look at the preview, it looks good. And I'm going to pull up my histogram. Look, great histogram, showing a really good level of brightness, but not too bright, no blown out areas. a nice exposure. I tend to leave my camera on automatic white balance, and that generally gives me a good color. But in case you're not sure, you can always shoot in RAW mode, and that will give you the ability to change the color temperature or white balance in the post-processing. It's that easy. And I found I've taken pictures at family events and with people and been able to use this technique without too much trouble. And the great thing, of course, about digital photography is that you can see your results right away and make a change if you need to make a change. And although using TTL, the automatic flashes, can make things easier. You don't need to worry about these calculations or changes in the parameters. But you can see this is a perfectly easy way. You have a powerful flash that you can use for a lot of indoor situations, and they're very inexpensive, so you can save a lot of money. And try this yourself. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.